In Japan, a large number of people go back to their native places for the New Year holidays and the Bon Festival in summer. So the trains are extremely crowded with these people during the holiday seasons. This explains that many people living in major cities come from local districts. Particularly in the 1960s, more than 1 million people moved into large cities from local areas each year. This chart indicates the transition of population increase in Japan. Since 1850, the population has been increasing by leaps and bounds. This is Hokkaido, one of the 4 main islands of Japan. It had been the only unexplored region of the country until 1869, when development work was initially undertaken. At that time, there were only 58,000 people living in this spacious area, measuring 77,000 square kilometers. This is the scene of farming in Hokkaido in its earliest days. Many people who settled in Hokkaido were unemployed workers. The population increase that accompanied the modernization of the nation gave rise to mass unemployment, posing a serious social problem. In Japan, before the Second World War, the government tried to solve the problem by sending the unemployed to the undeveloped areas. This is a potato field in Hokkaido today. The development in its earliest days was carried out by the American system, resulting in a large-scale farming. Here in this remote region of the country, the migration provided a major prime mover of its economic development. This is Sapporo, the economic and industrial center of Hokkaido. Today it has grown to the country's 5th largest city with a population of 1,540,000. This is the ruined Tokyo immediately after the Second World War. At that time, there were no jobs for people in cities, so many of them lived aimlessly in farming villages. By the defeat in war, Japan lost overseas territories, followed by the repatriation of about 6 million people, who at first tried to find the means of survival in farm villages. In 1950, the Korean War broke out. All of a sudden, the Japanese economy was revitalized, providing the American forces with munitions of war. The munitions boom triggered the high economic growth of the country. This chart indicates Japan's post-war gross national product, GNP, and the increase of per capita income. The economic growth after 1960 was really impressive. Japan in the 1960s marked the average of 10% economic growth rate annually, far exceeding those of the major countries in the West. The Japanese have the highest rate of savings in the world. Their savings were effectively utilized for the nation's industrialization. Catch up with the West and overtake them. With this slogan, the economic reconstruction progressed in leaps and bounds. The old factories destroyed by the war were replaced one after another by the latest facilities with the introduction of the advanced technologies from the West. Is a factory for mass production of cars, symbolizing the dawn of an age for homemade cars. Within 2 decades, the Japanese car industry begins to lead the global market. Despite the overall economic growth of the nation, coal mining industry began to decline. Coal mines were closed one after another. The decline of coal mining industry was triggered mainly by the big change in the use of energy from coal to oil. The inexpensive oil from the Middle East and other oil-producing countries greatly helped Japan, a resources-poor nation, to achieve high economic growth. Beginning in the 1960s, the government played a leading role in promoting the construction of advanced plants for heavy and chemical industries along the coastal regions of the country. The industrial areas were concentrated around the Pacific coast for efficient foreign trade, and it gradually grew into the Pacific belt. Japan depends largely on oil for its industries and people's living. Since the first oil crisis, many oil storage bases were built in many parts of the country, where oil for at least 139 days, or 5 months, is constantly stored for ready use. This is a typical scene of farming areas in Japan. The rapid economic growth had a great impact on various sectors involving farm villages. The Japanese agriculture was once associated with an extremely hard work. It was even called grabbling industry. Since 1960, the effective use of machines increased, relieving the farmers from hard work. The spread of agricultural chemicals, chemical fertilizers and herbicides brought about much easier farming with far less trouble. Farmers were able to purchase agricultural machines, agricultural chemicals and chemical fertilizers through their cooperatives. This is a scene of joint work in rice refining. The chart indicates the changes in the industrial structure. 1950, as a turning point, the agricultural population was reduced to a great extent. Meanwhile, the population in the secondary and tertiary industries increased. How was this change brought about? The 1960s was a period associated with the continual movement from almost all parts of the country towards major cities. The post-war Japan did step up industrialization. For that, they tried to secure additional workforce from farm villages. These junior high pupils are coming to Tokyo for group employment. A great number of junior and senior high school leavers came to large cities where they took the offered jobs. Public commerce and industry offices, as well as employers in large cities, went to an extent of chartering special trains to welcome the young people. These youths were called golden eggs. They worked at factories and shops, firmly supporting the basic part of Japanese economy. The chart shows the actual state of worker migration from a village in northern Japan. 2,013 people from 2,704 farming households in the village are working away from home. 70% of them are farmers in the prime of life, aged from 21 to 50 years. Father, now leaving for another place for work, is seen off by his wife and child. Men disappeared from their village where there was a little work to do in winter. While the husband was far away from the village working somewhere in town, the wife spent lonesome nights, sometimes sleepless from cares about her husband. Away from their home villages and separated from their families, these workers were spending lonesome days in large cities. Many people left, and there weren't enough successors in many villages. That was a serious problem. Many people remained as bachelors at the age of over 40. because the few young women would marry them, although they would make more money than office workers in the city. Some villages, in fact, recruited brides from other countries in Asia. This is Tokyo, the nation's capital. Japan is a small country, and besides, 70% of it is mountainous. The concentration of industry and culture in major cities attracted the population there, eventually posing a serious social problem of urban congestion. Many young couples in Japan lived in modest single-room apartments. This let the West ridicule the Japanese. They call the Japanese worker bees living in rabbit huts. Despite all that, the housing conditions in Japan haven't been improved much up to now. To solve the housing problem, the authorities took measures in 1955 for the construction of public housing compounds, commonly called danchi. People rushed in to seek a slim chance of getting one by drawing. Their chance was only 1/100th. It was even 1/1000th in some places where living conditions were better. But the rooms in this public apartment compound, danchi, were still small. This apartment is a type classified as 2DK, with 2 small rooms and a dining kitchen, and the smaller than standard-sized tatami mats were sarcastically called danchi size. The land price here is highest in Japan. A piece of land, only the size of a handkerchief, costs 2 million yen. This is a common scene around farm villages near Tokyo. From 1960 to 1985, the land prices soared by 40 times. This naturally pushed residential areas further away from central Tokyo. True, the houses are larger now, but just think of how long you have got to pay off the housing loan. This will go on nearly forever, until you retire many, many years ahead. In Japan, it's a lifelong job for an average man to buy his own house. What a reality. The morning rush hour scene. People who have moved into distant suburban areas must commute each morning in fully packed trains like this, taking 2 hours. But an increasing number of people are trying to buy reasonably priced houses with land in more distant areas because of the forbidding prices of land in central Tokyo. Large cities are constantly flooded with cars. 5 minutes on foot, but 10 minutes by car. This kind of ridiculous traffic snarl is a daily affair in urban life. Ominously increasing behind the thriving economy, represented by industrialization and urbanization, were strange sorts of pollution-caused diseases such as the Minamata disease and Yokkaichi asthma. These victims are claiming compensation for the pollution-caused damages. The concentration of industries and population in major cities gave rise to a serious problem involving garbage disposal, providing a constant source of headaches for public organizations concerned. The offshore reclamation served as an effective means of space expansion for the congested cities, which constantly suffered from land shortages. In the case of Tokyo, the history of land reclamation goes as far back as 400 years ago. Up to the present, an aggregate space area of 23,700 hectares has come into being through continual reclamation, a man-made land accounting for 40% of Tokyo's 23 wards put together. This park lies over the reclaimed land. Now, Tokyo has 34 parks of this kind, meeting the needs of citizens for a pleasant living environment, harmonizing with nature. Shown in this chart are the details of the nation's public work expenditures. During the high economic growth period, the whole nation was excessively involved in industrial development alone, and little attention was given to improving the living environment. In the 1970s, however, people in general began to criticize this trend. It wasn't long before the nation set on stepping up the improvement of living environment. This is the new metropolitan center, Shinjuku. Japan is subject to frequent earthquakes. This natural condition prevented the construction of high-rise buildings in earlier days, but the rapid development of architectural know-how has helped the engineers to overcome a number of difficulties involved. The exceptionally high land prices these days have provided one of the factors to accelerate the construction of high-rise buildings. A network of underground railway lines crisscrossing the metropolitan areas serves to carry more than 9 million people each day. It's a vital means of transport in urban life. There are underground streets running around the Shinjuku station. These streets help to alleviate the rush hour congestion on the surface roads near the station, where 660,000 people get on and off the trains every day. In some parts of the network, the Metropolitan Expressway rises high up in the air, drawing impressive curves. The Tokyo Olympics in 1964 triggered the three-dimensional construction of urban roads on a large scale. The chart here indicates the expanding networks of expressways on the Shinkansen lines. As you see, the major cities are linked to each other by these networks. In the 1970s, measures were taken to spread the population and industries in wider areas of the country. For that, faster transport services were essential. The Shinkansen network incorporates the latest of technologies such as the electronically operated automatic control system and jointless long rails. Its trains run at the maximum speed of 220 kilometers an hour, the fastest in the world at the time, and without a single accident since the start of its commercial operation 2 decades ago. It's now possible for a businessman to make a day's trip anywhere easily within a 500-kilometer radius from Tokyo. The development of highway networks has made the trucks so far the mainstay of short-distance transport, play a leading part in long-distance transport. On the other hand, handy agencies have emerged to provide quick personal service by delivering goods of any kind to any part of the country the following day. This is one example of a village in northern Japan. The chart shows the changes in the number of people working away from their village. It's obviously observed that the invitation of manufacturing enterprises into the village has resulted in a gradual decrease of migrating workers. This is one of the factories invited to this village. Here, their active movement to invite manufacturing industry resulted in the local establishment of 14 factories in their village, where 4,500 people are now working. There's a growing trend of young people, the successors to their farmer parents, working at the factory, and the old parents continuing the farm work. The advance of factories into rural districts has resulted in an increasingly aging population in farming. But the strong yen caused recession and trade friction are beginning to prevent smooth corporate advances into rural districts. More and more companies are attempting to open their plants overseas while terminating their local operations at home. This is called industrial hollowing. In keeping with the overseas advances of Japanese factories, the unemployed are gradually increasing at home. These elderly people are being honored on the national occasion, paying respect for senior citizens. In Japan, there's a mounting need of coping with a newly emerging problem that is aging society. This open space has been prepared for factory construction, but nothing seems to start here shortly. This sort of open space can be seen more often these days in many parts of the country, as an indication of harsh reality Japan is facing today. Japan still has many difficult problems to solve in the years to come.